If you live in Washington County, you've probably seen some pretty nasty attack ads for the district attorney's race.
An extremist who wants to defund police and abolish prisons.
How in the world can we trust Kevin Barton?
So we sat down with the candidates, the incumbent trying to keep his seat.
My priority as a career prosecutor is to keep Washington County safe.
And his more progressive challenger.
What I have advocated for is a more comprehensive approach to public safety.
And a good number of people are living on the edge of homelessness. Tonight, we're going to meet some of them.
My biggest fear is we're going to end up sleeping in my car. And how am I going to tell my child that? That's my biggest fear.
Here's The Story.
I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. All the ways to communicate with us right there at the bottom of your screen. You can email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com. Or you can use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter. Or you can leave us an old-fashioned voicemail. Just call our phone number, 503-226-5090. Well, you may have heard Oregon has a big election day coming up on Tuesday, and in Washington County, the ballot features a battle royale between the incumbent district attorney and a well-funded challenger who wants his job. Now, I got to be honest, sometimes these types of races can really be a snooze fest, but not this one. The two have raised a combined $1 million. There are allegations flying back and forth. The two have taken off their gloves, and both are looking for the knockout blow.
Kevin Barton is the current district attorney in Washington County, elected 4 years ago. He's worked as a prosecutor in the office for 15 years. On the other side, Brian Decker, a lawyer who worked as a federal prosecutor in Arizona for nearly 4 years, and then in 2016 moved to Oregon and worked as a public defender. The challenger believes the system can change for the better.
What I have advocated for is a more comprehensive approach to public safety that also provides resources to treatment programs and other programs in the community that are going to tackle issues like addiction and homelessness and mental illness, which unfortunately under the current approach do not get addressed enough until they end up in the jail and in the criminal justice system.
Barton, the incumbent, favors a more traditional approach.
My priority as a career prosecutor is to keep Washington County safe. It's where I live and where I'm raising my family. And I think that when we have outsiders that dump in, extremely large amounts of money that are trying to accomplish radical change and radical reform, I think we've seen across the country that that is not a recipe for success and not what we want here in our community.
It went on for years.
One of the big issues in the race involves the prosecution of a nurse at the Coffee Creek prison. 27 women accused the male nurse of sex abuse in 2018. The district attorney's office reviewed the case but did not bring charges. Decker's using that as an example of what's wrong with the current DA.
When law enforcement presented that case to the Washington County District Attorney's Office under Kevin Barton, they declined to charge the nurse with any sort of crimes, because what they told OPB a couple months ago was that they didn't think there was enough evidence because nobody would believe the women because of their criminal records.
But Barton says his opponent is the one getting it wrong.
That was the right decision in 2018 based on the evidence that we had. After that decision was made, the FBI conducted an investigation, an additional investigation, and the suspect in that case provided sworn deposition testimony. And 3 years later, the U.S. Attorney's Office was able to use that additional FBI investigation and sworn deposition testimony to file charges. I talked to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they have told me that they would not have been able to file charges, just like we were not able to file charges based on the evidence in 2018.
But Decker, the challenger, says the DA is the one who's wrong.
At this point, he's saying now that the FBI came up with new evidence, when the truth is, Oregon State Police remained the lead investigators on the case, even after Washington County District Attorney's Office made its initial charging decision and continued to present new evidence to Washington County, but the District Attorney's Office decided not to further pursue the case.
Another issue that surfaced, the way the challenger, Decker, treated 3 different crime victims when they were on the witness stand in various cases he had as a defense attorney. They accuse him of saying that they were lying. It's the focus of an ad by the current DA.
So he decimated my character.
Decker, the challenger, rejects the idea that he mistreated the women.
I have represented victims in court before, sat down with them, counseled them. I know that going through this experience of a trial like this is incredibly difficult for victim witnesses. And that's why I did my job as best I could and as respectfully as I could as an attorney who had been appointed to represent defendants.
But Barton, the DA, said the challenger went too far.
His representation went far beyond common decency. And I think the three women who came and spoke up made a very good point that he went too far, demeaned them, belittled them. And someone like that may be a wonderful criminal defense attorney, but would be a terrible district attorney.
And then there's the money. In terms of big checks, the Oregonian reports Decker, the challenger, got $225,000 from an Oregon man who also funded a now-defunct ballot campaign to decriminalize sex work. And Barton, the incumbent, got $100,000 from Nike co-founder Phil Knight.
Kevin Barton, the DA there, by the way, has a history of attracting well-financed challengers. 4 years ago, it was Max Wall, also a defense lawyer. That race ended up as the most expensive DA race in Oregon history. And Barton won. Now, on to homelessness. Tonight, families who rent facing eviction. Can you imagine the stress and the fear and the panic when you realize you have to move from where you are and you may not be able to find something you can afford? It's real, and it's happening in our community. Blair Best has our story.
Being told that, we're going to have to be out and have nowhere to go.
Lisa Antich and her family have lived in this home in southeast Portland for about 10 years. Out of the blue, their landlord sold it to an out-of-state buyer.
It was heart-wrenching. My biggest fear is we're going to end up sleeping in my car. And how am I going to tell my child that? That's my biggest fear.
The family lives on $1,000 a month between money she gets for her disability and retirement.
It's hard. It's hard, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it, and everything's a waiting list.
And they don't have time to wait.
We're out of days. We're on borrowed time. I was supposed to be out since the 30th of last month.
She can't find an apartment in her budget and has had no luck getting a housing voucher.
A lot of them wouldn't even help us until we're in the car. Yeah. And then a lot of them won't help us because I'm not addicted to drugs and I don't drink alcohol.
She's afraid of what life on the streets would be like.
I am terrified. I'm terrified. My uncle was just killed on 136th, walking down the street. It was on the news just like a couple weeks ago.
Their plan? To sleep in the car, since a motel room is too expensive.
Well, first of all, that should never happen. Families and their kids should always have alternatives and affordable rent, and no family should be forced to live in homelessness with their child.
That's the director of Portland's Housing Bureau.
But no kid should be living in a car on the street.
I'm trapped. I can't afford to move, and then I don't have the credit to move.
In Salem is another side of this crisis. Kathleen Quinn is disabled and lives on a fixed income of $850 a month. She's been at this apartment for about 6 years, and it's been one issue after another.
And I've been telling them how hard it is for me to breathe in here.
Black mold coats her walls and windows, is under her sink and bedroom carpet, and all over her clothes.
My carpet, my furniture, my Birkenstocks, everything.
The septic tank floods into her apartment.
But trying to live in this, it's been horrifying. 15, 20 boxes.
Moving boxes fill her living room.
So I think I have enough.
She's preparing to move, even though she has nowhere to go.
So this is the bathroom, and the water heater's in there that flooded.
And in the bedroom,
this whole window had to be taken out, and it was super full of mold. That's inhumane. It's inhumane to expect people to live in such high levels of mold and ignore them. And
just like Lisa, she's tried calling people for help, but gets nowhere.
We don't know where we're going to go. We don't know what we're going to do. We don't know where we're going to be.
When I talked with the director of Portland Housing, she said families in these positions should contact the Joint Office of Homeless Services or the Portland Housing Bureau, since there are transitional housing options to keep children and families off the streets.
Okay, Blair, but some of these people have already tried those avenues. Why aren't they having any luck?
Well, I don't know, Pat, but I would have to agree with them. It's hard to get a hold of these groups. I mean, even when I tried, I either didn't hear back at all or it took a long time for a response. And the thing is, some of these people don't have time like that to wait. I mean, you heard from that one family, they're on borrowed time. They could be on the streets as soon as tomorrow if they don't get immediate help. So while yes, there are systems in place to help these families, it's almost as if they don't kick in until people have already hit rock bottom and are actually living on the streets. So what position does that put people in who are trying to avoid homelessness? It just feels like a never-ending fight, Pat.
Yeah, it's frustrating that the system and the safety net is not there yet, at least, to catch them.
Exactly.
All right, thank you, Blair. Let's get to a question now that we've gotten from many of you. James asked, when is the city going to repair and return the iconic elk monument that was torn down? Restoring these monuments to their rightful location would be a strong symbol of healing and moving forward in this city. Well, good news, James, and all you other elk fans out there. The elk is coming back to downtown Portland. This week, city commissioners adopted a resolution to restore both the statue and the reproduction of the original fountain base, along with improvements to the right-of-way. It was sometimes tricky driving around it. So far, though, no timeline on when all of that happens. The elk statue was ground zero for the radical justice protests that we saw in downtown Portland for much of 2020. For months, protesters camped out in front of the Multnomah County Justice Center, federal courthouse, and the Portland Police Station. The Thompson elk just happened to be caught right in the middle. Some people put graffiti on the elk, they set fires in the fountain, and some turned it into a memorial for people killed by police. Eventually, city workers removed the statue, saying it had become a safety hazard, and the fountain was dismantled. The elk statue's been in storage in a secret location ever since. For the last year, city workers have been trying to decide what they're going to do with the elk, and a lot of you have told us, and you also told them, you want it back where it was. The elk has been there for more than 100 years, but recently it's become a symbol as well of downtown's recovery after the last 2 years. People got pretty emotional about it. Several of them actually put on antlers to take part in a city council meeting and plead for its return.
It's not only feasible to restore the fountain, but imperative that the city restore it as a clear message of its commitment to revitalizing the downtown and bring a sense of hope and healing to its citizens.
Restoring the historic icon, the beautiful bronze elk and its storied granite fountain base, and having it adorn the original 1900 site has become a metaphor for advancing downtown's recovery after 2 tempestuous years and a pandemic. Beauty is a necessity in our lives, and this monument is uplifting. Full recovery will come one step at a time, and this is a monumental stride in the right direction.
By the way, extra points for using tempestuous in a sentence. Dan Ryan and Carmen Rubio also brought antlers to the meeting, and in the end, they all voted in favor of bringing the elk back. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler agreed it would be a symbol of recovery for the city, but also of victory.
The anguish for me, as somebody who was born and raised here, was to see it blown apart, burned, desecrated, graffitied, and then to add insult to injury, have somebody passed out in the middle of it, still the next morning when the media came to photograph it. And bringing the statue back is more than just a statement of aesthetics, and it's more than a statement, to me at least, about the recovery of this city. It's a statement that people who break the law and break things do not get the last word in our city. We do. We, the people of this city, get the final word, and it's coming back.
And we haven't really heard from anyone who's against the elk returning, and if that's you, I guess you could send us an email. We did see a commentary from Alex Zielinski from the Portland Mercury, who offered her perspective on it, though. She wrote, "People certainly broke things during the 2020 protests. Their fires blackened a well-known statue that had proudly stood over a century in a key part of downtown. But bones were also broken in 2020 by police batons, skin was seared open with fiery munitions, and lungs choked with tear gas. What's missing from City Hall's discussion of the elk statue is the acknowledgement of the damage done to living, breathing Portland residents surrounding its removal. Wheeler has yet to express remorse or admit blame for allowing officers to consistently and indiscriminately inflict physical and psychological damage on citizens who were legally protesting in their city streets. Well, that's her opinion. And here's mine. It's good to have the statue coming back. I'm glad it's going back to its original place where it will stand, hopefully, and not be attacked for another 100 years.
Are you in the market for a new house? Well, in Oregon, you're once again allowed to write so-called love letters to the seller.
It helps buyers, especially first-time home buyers, who might not have a chance to compete for a house, to be able to compete.
But some worry these letters could lead to discrimination.
We as agents cannot steer clients into or away from certain neighborhoods because of the diversity or lack thereof of diversity. But the love letters are doing that for us.
When the story continues.
Welcome back. Keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. Let us know what you think about the stories, what you think about the elk coming back. Love it, hate it, leave it alone? Let us know. You could also give us a call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Now to an update on a story from last year that a lot of you had something to say about. Remember when Oregon lawmakers banned those so-called love letters from potential homebuyers? They worried it could lead to discrimination. Well, a judge just said no. He's overturned the ban. The love letters are back. Here's Christelle Kumwe.
Prospective homebuyers in Oregon can continue to send love letters to people selling homes.
We were overjoyed. This is, I think, shows that Oregon's law was poorly conceived from the start.
Last year, Oregon lawmakers passed a new law preventing buyers from writing love letters, heartfelt correspondence to sellers with their offers, telling them about themselves and why they're a good fit for a home. Oregon's law ordered sellers' agents to reject direct communications from buyer to seller outside the scope of a traditional offer. On Wednesday, a federal judge permanently blocked that ban.
it was a clear violation of the First Amendment.
A lawsuit was filed in federal court by the Pacific Legal Foundation, saying the ban violates the freedom of speech for real estate agents and their clients.
Love letters are about communication between a seller and a buyer. Sellers are looking for the best fit, the best offer for their house. It helps buyers, especially first-time home buyers, who might not have a chance to compete for a house, to be able to compete.
What your sellers should be looking at are what are the terms and what's my bottom line, not who is buying.
Real estate agent Michelle Maida pushed for the ban.
And in real estate, we as agents cannot steer clients into or away from certain neighborhoods because of the diversity or lack thereof of diversity. But the love letters are doing that for us.
She says the letters could reveal personal information about the buyers that could lead to an offer being rejected due to discrimination.
Because the seller has looked at a love letter and has seen, for example, if it's a same-sex couple, well, it can be said perhaps that they had discriminated against them because it was a same-sex couple.
Yeah, if there's discrimination, you enforce anti-discrimination laws. You go after anyone who is discriminating, but you don't ban speech.
Ortner believes the Oregon decision will send a message to other states.
And I hope that this will be a warning for them that all they'll get if they pass such a law is a lawsuit and a fight and a loss because these laws are unconstitutional.
Christelle Kumwe, KGW News.
Interesting stuff. Lots of homes being bought and sold. Still ahead, we're opening the KGW Vault to look back at the historic protest at Portland State University in 1970.
Yeah, we are hopeful getting up this We want
When the story continues. "52 years ago, hundreds of Portland State University students joined a national movement protesting the Vietnam War. Those protests escalated after the Ohio National Guard killed 4 students at Kent State University. On May 11, 1970, police were sent in to forcibly clear peaceful demonstrators at Portland State and sent 31 students and faculty to the hospital. Let's take a look back now with the KGW Vault.
When it was over, 30 student demonstrators and 2 policemen were injured. The students were on a 3-day strike protesting police action at Kent State. They were ordered to remove the barricades and a plastic hospital tent. They refused, so the police did. That brought more student reaction. Where only a few students and some outsiders had been involved, now there was 3,000. They marched on City Hall demanding to see Mayor Schrunk. He refused, but offered to meet with student representatives in his office. After waiting for 2 hours, they returned to the park blocks. They said more demonstrations would follow, and they did.
We, the students of Portland State University, hereby demand that there be a full investigation by an impartial committee of lawyers and legal authorities of the incident involving police violence towards male and female students and faculty in and around the first aid tent in the park blocks opposite Smith Memorial Center on Monday, May 11th. In addition, we feel that the tactical squad should be immediately abolished as it has no function in a free society.
I am authorized to say that we are hopeful of getting up this framework. We want the mayor! Hold it!
Portland Mayor Schrunk refused to come out and talk with the students, saying a second confrontation would accomplish nothing. A poll of people calling the police station in City Hall indicates that people favored by about 25-1 police action last night. That was not the reaction here. Ivan Smith reporting from City Hall.
Long ago, yesterday on the anniversary of that violence, some of those protesters gathered at PSU to unveil a plaque commemorating those events. Here's what some of them had to say.
31 students, women and men, were sent to the hospital with injuries, and we quickly began organizing for a march the following morning, numbering 4,000 angry PSU students and faculty members to march on Portland City Hall to peacefully protest the police attack of May 11th. We feared for our lives, but peacefully stood our ground.
A lot of the people involved in the PSU strike were veterans of Vietnam.
We actually believe we could slow the killings in Vietnam down a little bit. We hope that our efforts helped.
I mean, it was a turning point. It was something brave to do.
I'm here with my daughter. She told me she was proud of me, and that made everything worth it.
A lot of emotions from history still very alive right now. If any of you have memories from that time, let us know. And keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. When we come back, the real way that you can help our community. For this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to donate to Hala. They're a mentoring program based in East Portland that connects kids of color with role models who share their culture. This fall, they're planning to open a public charter school in partnership with the Reynolds School District. If you want to donate, just hold your phone's camera up to the QR code on your screen, or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. This is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small. Well, that's the end of our program. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow night.
This is KGW News at 6:30.
And good evening. We begin at 6:30 with a COVID update because there's a good chance you know someone who's tested positive recently because cases, outbreaks, hospitalizations, all climbing in Multnomah County, and we're getting new guidance from health officials to once again mask up indoors. Thank you for joining us. I'm David Molko.
And I'm Laurel Porter. As Mike Bennett reports, this is a recommendation, not a mandate.
This is a mini surge, if you will.
Dr. Jennifer Vines, back in front of the camera for the first